All right, so we're going to get into building our desk. So what's the first thing we should do before we build our desk? Open Cinema 4D. Drawings, we don't need the drawings yet. What about our folders? Set up a project folder, right? We always want to stay organized first. That's always going to be our first step in making sure that our stuff is working. So remember we created last time this project folder, and inside the project folder there's a bunch of folders. We're going to copy that folder. So copy your project folder and then rename it to be Miniroom. Okay. So once you have that, then we can get into Cinema, and then we can save our file. Even though we haven't done anything yet to it, we still want to start saving it. That way we know that as we save, it's going to go into the right spot. So just save it as, and then drop it into your Miniroom Scenes folder. Okay, and I recommend naming everything your last name underscore the project underscore the number that you're on. So I'm naming mine Sarcona Miniroom 01. Okay, so now every time we hit Control S, that's going to save our project, obviously. And if we look at the hotkey for it, you'll see, I guess not, different software. There's a save incremental right here. So you can actually save incremental, and that will save a different version number. So if I hit this, it'll save it as number 2. Hit it again, save it as number 3, okay? So I would recommend that throughout the day, saving as often as you feel like it, but also every once in a while, save incremental. You'll get a different version, and then you can have 2, 3, 4, 5 copies of your stuff, okay? So our first step in this is we need to build a room. We need to build a shell that's going to be where our stuff is going to be located. So we're going to create a cube. That's the easiest shape to start with. For the first project, don't think that this is going to be something you will ever use in your portfolio. This is simply a tool that's going to allow us to screw around with the software, understand some of those basics, and just start playing, okay? Some things we didn't go over last time. You'll see that we have obviously the move tool right here. You'll also see that there's dots on top of the cube, okay? There's one here, one there, and one there. These will allow you to change the proportions of your cube. So change the proportions of your cube. I would also zoom out and maybe make this whole thing a bit bigger by hitting scale and scaling it up a few 100%. Okay, anything that we do, we can always come back and change it later. If the room's too small, we can make it bigger later. If the room's too big, we can make it smaller. If we destroyed the cube, it's a cube, we can make it again really quick, okay? So I've done a couple things. I've stretched it out so it's a good proportion. You know, for me, it doesn't matter what yours is. You can, again, change it later if you need to. And I've also raised it up to the ground, okay? That grid plane that's there, I spun around in my view and then moved it up so that it feels like the cube is sitting on the plane. It's not going to kill you if it's not there. It's just OCD-wise better. All right, so we have this cube. Now, we don't need to delete one of these faces on here, one of the sides, but it helps letting us see inside of it. Otherwise, every time we work, we have to be inside the cube, and this will get really annoying because sometimes we'll be out of it. So typically we want to have one of the faces deleted, basically so we can see into the room, okay? If you ever done one of those shoebox things in grade school, that's kind of like what we're doing. So what we need to do is make this an editable shape. Right now, it's basically locked into this parametric mode is what it's called. If I clicked on that cube here, remember how we have that object area? We can add segments and stuff. We don't need to add segments, but we have that. I'm going to get rid of that and allow us to edit faces on this. So I'm going to hit the number. I'm going to hit the letter C on my keyboard. Okay, and you'll notice that that tab is now gone away. Okay, once you hit C, it's the same thing as hitting this button here. Let me hit undo. There you go. It's the same thing as hitting that. It basically says, okay, you're satisfied with this shape, lock it in, and now you can edit the actual components of it. Okay, so the dots are gone, so we don't have those anymore. I'm going to grab the face mode, which is right here. Oh, sorry. You just can't see it. Yeah. Let's see how far I can go over here. Right there, okay. So this face mode right here will allow us to grab the face components of it, okay? These are edges, these are points, those are faces. It says polygons, but the whole thing is a polygon. So I'm just going to click any one of these. It doesn't matter which one. Obviously, don't grab the top or bottom, so I guess it does matter which one. A side, and then delete one of the sides. Okay, literally just hit the delete key or backspace key, and that'll be good. Cool. So now we have a shell of a room, okay? For the time being, it's wonderful, it's perfect. We can go back and tweak it if we need to, but we don't want to touch it at this point. What we then want to do is start generating things that we could then put into our scene, okay? So I don't want to accidentally grab something and move it, because then my room is now distorted and it's very difficult to live in that room. So what we're going to do is switch back to object mode, which is this thing. Okay. Now the hotkey for that, if you want to write that down, the enter key will get you into these things here. Okay, so I just hit enter a bunch of times and you'll see how it toggles between all three of these different modes. Or I can just click that and get back to it. Okay. So now what I want to do is I have to be in this mode so that I can throw this onto a layer and lock the layer so I don't accidentally move or scale or do anything bad to this shape. So there's my object. I'm going to go to my layers. You can see that one, yeah? Okay. On the far right of your screen on the bottom it says attributes and layers. You click obviously layers. And then you go to File, New Layer from Object Selection, and then we'll just give this a name, Room. And then I'm going to go up here to my objects and also give that a name, Room. Room. On the far right, you have attributes and layers. There you go. And so you just go to File and make sure it says New Layer from Object Selection. What do you think would happen if I went to File, New Layer on the top? Yeah, we just create a new layer, right? So in 3D, you can make just 100 layers. I mean, you can do that in Illustrator too, 100 layers, but it doesn't actually assign anything to those layers, okay? In Photoshop, you have to draw on a layer. In Illustrator, you draw on a layer. In 3D, the layers are just for organizational purposes. They will not, there's no stacking order to the layers to show what's in front because it's 3D. But we do want to keep them named, so obviously we know what they're called. So I name my objects up here. I name my layers down there. And notice the color here. This is like a burnt orange, and this is a burnt orange. So as we create layers, we can see very easily what objects are on what layers because of that color connection between the two. If you didn't have something up here, let me just remove this from the layer. So if you had this little slash, you could just drag this orange into that orange, and then there we go, okay? So if you needed to add something to a layer, remove it from a layer, it's very easy to do. Don't be afraid of right-clicking or clicking or dragging or trying stuff out, okay? Cool. So we need to lock this layer so you don't break that item. What are you going to click to lock it? The lock, right? It's an easy one. We'll get more into what the other things mean, but yeah, click the lock. You'll see that the top item then becomes grayed out. We can't select it, we can't move it or scale it or delete it. So that's what we wanted. And then we can just switch back to attributes. Okay, so we've locked that item. We jump back and we're back on our attributes. Most of the time you'll spend it in this format. Objects is on the top, attributes is on the bottom, and only when you're organizing will you switch back to layers and start screwing with those things, okay? So now we need to build something. The way that we're going to build stuff initially is a whatever fashion, okay? We're going to build things a certain way now. When you start playing, just play. Just start building stuff however you think it should be built. As long as it doesn't look like Donkey or Farquaad's hair, you'll be fine, okay? That was your goal in life. All right, so this is typically, well actually, let's do the easiest item first, okay? We'll do a picture frame. We always want to have a reference for what we're going to be creating. So we're going to go with the Dollar Tree picture frames. Okay, something like this. So what I know about this picture frame in this 2D image is not very helpful. I need to know what the 3D parts of it look like. And what I know about it is basically it's like a tube that goes around it, like the frame part is there, and then there's a piece of glass, and then there's a backing to it. That's typically how the picture frame works, okay? So we're going to start off with a shape. As you build stuff, you typically start off with a starting shape. So out of all these things, which one looks the closest to that starting shape? Cube or plane. Either one would be correct. It's just a matter of how you want to build it. We're going to start with a cube for ours. Okay. As you create something, I'm zoomed out. Let's say I'm way over here, right? I'm on the other side of my world. I want to see where that cube is. Remember, you can hit O, and it'll jump you right to that object you have selected. We also want to hit on another hotkey here. Look, as I'm orbiting around, I can't see my item. I move over, there it is, and now I'm like out of the room. I want to be able to orbit around that item as I'm working on it because it just makes my life a lot easier. In this sub-menu here, it says camera, navigation, change it to object mode. Okay, so camera, navigation, object mode. And I would write that down because your preferences don't save. So every time you come into Cinema, you should set that option there. And what that's going to do is, instead of us orbiting around basically wherever we clicked and started dragging, it'll spin us around that object so it's much easier to work with. Camera, navigation, object mode. So now as I spin around, you can see I'm spinning around this exact object. This is much easier to work with than that other thing that we just had. Okay. So what I need to do is it doesn't matter where this is at, by the way, or what size it is, we're going to adjust those things. If this is a huge picture frame now, that's not a big deal. I'll shrink it down later. I'm going to grab one of these squares and just give this a little bit of depth. Don't be concerned with which square I'm grabbing, as long as it's kind of like makes sense to you, okay? Anything can be rotated or moved or whatever. We just need this to be flatter, and that's the thickness of our picture frame.
Is there anything that gives you a sense of the scale?
Right here on the side. If I'm clicked on my object, it'll say 200 by 200 by 13. So that's a good question. If we are doing something like an 8 by 10, right, and I know, okay, I need these proportions in here, I could simply go in here and let's say put 81 here and 100 there, which is similar to 8 by 10, right? Same proportions. And that will be the same proportions as an 8 by 10. Okay? Or if I'm doing a computer screen, and you'll see it at the end of class, or by the end of class, A picture frame is no different than a computer screen as far as what it looks like. There's a border around it and something in the middle. Same thing with the TV, right? So you have a lot of things you can build off this one shape. Okay, so cool. So now we need to be able to edit what this thing looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit a key that allows us to edit the faces. What key is that? Nope. C. So hit the C key so those dots go away, and then we can edit the faces. Now, if at some point you're like, oh crap, I needed to scale it or whatever, once you hit C, I could then go to my scale tool and manually scale the item if I needed it, okay? So don't be concerned with you're stuck or something. The more comfortable you get with the tools, the easier it's going to be for you to move and scale and whatever else. All right, so what I want to do is I want to take this face right here in the front. Yours might be in a different spot, but that's fine, whatever the face is that makes sense. And I want to scale it down, okay? If I go to the faces, which is the enter key, right, to toggle to that enter key, and I click on it, and I scale it down, watch what happens. Okay? Do you see how it's no longer that square frame? Now it's like at this weird angle. We don't want that, right? We want it to actually have like this blocky frame and be inset. That's what it should be. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new face there. There's a bunch of different ways to create new faces, new geometry. In this case, we're going to use what's called an extrude inner, okay? If you right-click on that face, this pulls up an enormous menu of things that you can do to that face. You'll see one of the tools in here is bevel, extrude, extrude inner, matrix, extrude, and smooth shift. Yours may look different because you're in 19 and I'm in 20 right now, but essentially these are very similar tools. We need to get to the extrude inner. Notice on the far right side it says M squiggly W. That's a hotkey, okay? So if I want to get to the extrude inner, I could right click, I could go to extrude inner, that gets me there, or I hit MW and it gets me there too. Or, I don't know if it's the same hotkey in yours, but I is also extrude inner. So I could also just hit I and that will still get me there, okay? As you get comfortable with Cinema, you will spend a lot of time with your left hand on the keyboard, navigating, moving around, hitting those hotkeys, and very little time going up to menus, because most of the work we're going to do is going to be in here. The way that you model something is you're constantly like going to this tool, doing this, moving something, going to the tools again, going to the tools, moving, scaling, whatever. So you'll see you'll constantly be in this menu. And these things, even though it's like, that's a crazy hotkey, you'll get it down in no problem at all. Okay, this is where people will get confused. Don't touch the move tool or the scale tool or anything like that. We have an extrude inner tool selected right now. It should be a block with a little orange block on top. Just click and drag away from this tool, and we should be able to drag it left or right and bring that face inward. Obviously, make sure you're spun around so you can actually see that face going inward. Good so far? Cool. All right, so now what we need to do is push the face in. That will give us the other one. If I did another extrude inner, it'll do the exact same thing. It takes the face and it just like basically creates a new one in the same plane. So I'm going to right click again, and then that's where the next one above it, extrude, will come in handy. And you'll see the hotkey for that one is MT or just D, right? So however you want to get to extrude. I'm just going to hit D. And then the same thing, don't touch the tool, just click and drag your mouse left and right. And now we have a picture frame. Okay? Now if you didn't do that correctly, this is what it might look like. That. okay? Because it didn't extrude, it just pushes that face in.
So, but if you were trying to go for like a beveled in
Right.
frame,
Then you could do something like that.
or
Yep. Well, I could do this, right? So I could do another extrude inner and then push it in and then go to extrude again and then push that in. And now I have basically just like a chamfered edge, right, around it. Cool. All right, so now we have our picture frame. Now there is a level of realism in what we do every step of the way, okay? So let's look at this picture frame here. There we go. All right, so this is a weird looking picture frame, but it's still a picture frame. So if we look at this, that's what it looks like, right? It's like inset and then extruded inward. What do the edges look like? Do they look sharp or do they look rounded? Slightly rounded, okay? Very few surfaces in the real world are actually 100% crisp. If you had a knife blade or a sword or something like that, the blade itself might be super sharp and pointy, but around the other part of it, it may have a tight or a slight bevel to it. The tables right here, there's a slight bevel to it. A piece of wood, if it's crisp, it's typically going to tear or break or chip or splinter or whatever. So they will actually break the edge by just sanding it a little bit just to give it some roundness. So for this, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, that would have been an acceptable picture frame, but we want to have a little bit more detail to it by adding in a bevel, okay? And what the bevel is going to do is just give us where we have these sharp corners, it'll just round them slightly, and that'll make it look a little bit more pleasing for us. If we look at this, you'll see the reason we can see the bevel is that highlight right there. That highlight is what tells us we have that rounded corner. I'm going to hit this render button here, and you can see there's no rounding here. It literally is like one shade and another shade, and it looks very boring looking. Okay? So we're going to add a bevel all the way around where that corner is and all the way around where this inner one is. I'm going to reset mine so it's back to where it was. So we're all on the same page. MW, scale edit. There we go. So I'm going to go to edge. So however you want to get to edge, you can hit the enter key on your keyboard to cycle through to get to edge, or you can just click on edge right there. Oops. Too many undos. There we go. And then what we have to do is select the edges that we want to bevel. So I'm going to double click this edge, and I'm going to hold down shift and double click that edge. Okay, so those two edges right there, I've double clicked and then shift double clicked. And if you do it correctly, it should select all the way around. That's what double clicking an edge will do, is it'll select all the way around that edge. If you want to do it the long way, you're free to click individual edges and just hold shift. And so it should be double click. Good? Is yours not working? The other thing that we would have to be concerned about, extruding too many times. How many times did I extrude this one? Inward? 2 times, right? So what would happen if I extruded and didn't move it anywhere? The software still counts it as an extrude, and so basically I would have faces on top of faces or edges on top of edges, and then everything explodes, okay? So we don't want that to happen. Cool. So we have those edges selected. We're going to go to bevel. Which menu am I going to do to get to bevel? Which menu have we gone in so far? Right-clicking. Yep. Everything will be under right-clicking pretty much for all these tools that we're going into. Yes, ma'am. You'll use these over and over and over again. Any extruding that we do, any beveling that we do, and then there's another couple tools, those are typically like the 4 or 5 tools that we'll constantly use over and over and over again to build everything. So MS is the bevel tool. Yep. And just like before, we don't click on anything else except for what we're trying to do it to. So I'm going to click and drag right on this edge. Don't freak out when it explodes. Just click, hold it down, and drag it until you get a nice small bevel right in that corner. And if you do mess up, just hit undo. It may help to zoom in, like it's hard to see when we're really far out. So it may help to zoom into a corner and then do it there. Okay, now on mine, I'm getting a chamfering. So basically what it's doing is just like cutting the edge. That same effect that I did on the extrude is basically what I'm getting here. So on the right side of this, in the attributes, I have a whole bunch of options that I can play with. So obviously you have to be under attributes, and then you can change how this is being laid out. So maybe if I made this left it at chamfer and then just change the subdivisions. Change my angle here so you can see it. It'll change how many divisions are in that bevel, which then changes the smoothness of the bevel. So instead of there being like this, I just changed subdivision, and now it has 2 nice rounded bevels in there, or 2 divisions there, making it round. If you don't see it, you may have deselected. So undo, do your bevel again, and then in your attributes you should see those options. One of the annoying things about Cinema is that it doesn't keep track of all of these things that we do. So once I've done it and I click on something else like that, those tools are gone. Okay, so bevel is now gone from that list because I deselected and I reselected my item. So I would hit undo, go back to my edges, go back to the bevel tool, and then just add that in again. Okay. As you get more comfortable with the software, obviously you'll become a pro at doing that stuff. You have to go to your attributes on the side if you don't have that. Especially like how big things are. Typically beginners kind of overcompensate their bevels, so this picture frame, which has a nice soft bevel, they'll do something like that, you know, which isn't bad, but it's just like not what that's not what I want my picture frame to look like. Okay, once you're done with your bevel and you're happy with it, switch back to your modeling mode, and then click on your item. So what do picture frames usually have in them? Pictures, right? They also have certificates, glass, right? Anything that we're going to be doing with this specific one is, you know, we should kind of plan for that. If we had a wall of pictures, all the picture frames should be the same. Unless I'm buying them, then it's whatever's cheap, but typically you want them all to be the same. They typically will have glass on it, again, the same kind of glass, and there will typically be a picture itself inside there. So what we should do is we should set up this picture frame so that if we were to duplicate it, we're simply just changing what picture is inside each one of those, okay? So we don't have a piece of glass, all we have is a plane back there. So we're going to get a piece of glass. So I'm going to click on the plane, or the polygons here, and I'm going to click on that plane. And essentially what I want to do is I want to pull that plane off of that object. I want it to be a separate object that I could then duplicate and have my frame, a piece of my frame, the picture, and a piece of glass, all as 3 separate objects. And that way I can group them and move them and do whatever I need to. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to see if anything inside this list allows me to pull anything off of that surface. Okay. Now most of these you may not know what they do, and that's fine. What's not fine is not exploring the menu. You will find that inside these menus you may see something that changes how you do a certain tool. Okay. So I think if I look way down here at the bottom, this says split. And if I look at it, it looks like exactly what I want to do. Here's one object, here's another object, and it looks like those 2 things are being separated. Okay? If I'm paranoid and not sure, you have Google, Cinema 4D split. And it says, if you're working with an imported model from Trisquid, that doesn't help at all. I typed in. Oh, I probably didn't put that. There you go. So you can read through that and probably says, yes, split will work. So I've clicked on that face. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go down to split. Okay, so I've grabbed the face, right clicked and split it, or hit UP. And now you'll see that I have another object inside my object list. So we should have the frame, which is this one, and I have my glass or picture frame or picture, which is that one. Okay, so I'm going to rename these. So this will be picture. This one will be frame. One of the things that's kind of annoying with Cinema is the selection tools. It has some nice features to it, but if you're in a different selection tool like rectangle, it doesn't allow you to click on specific objects, or it is now, wasn't working before. So it's just something to be aware of. Sometimes you have to go back to the live selection or switch to a move tool and then click specifically on it. All right, so we have our picture frame. We have the picture, and then what else do we need? Glass, okay. So how would you copy this or duplicate it? Yep, we can do Control-C, Control-V, or if I spin around a little bit, I can hold the Control key. You'll see the icon changes to like 2 shapes, and just drag the arrow and that will duplicate that specific shape. Okay? And then obviously rename it so that's glass. Okay, so glass, frame, and picture. You can Control-C, Control-V, and move it if you want. Ideally, the glass should be in front of the picture. That makes the most sense. What's funny, they must have had to blur these out. These used to not be blurred out. It's weird. Well, whatever. All right, so I'm just grabbing an image. You can just use whatever image for now, and then you can replace it later. So I'm grabbing an image and I'm going to put it inside of my 2510 Miniroom textures folder. For this project, it's not a huge deal really what image you use. Going forward, anything that you use should be stuff that you have created or taken or you own the rights to. Or you can obviously download from a site like textures.com, which is a royalty-free site, okay? So I grabbed a whatever image and dropped it inside there. All right, so inside Cinema, I need to create how many different materials do we have for this item? 3, right? We have 3 objects. One's going to be like a plastic or a wood, one's a glass, and one's our picture, okay? So 3 different materials. So down here at the bottom, I'm just going to double click, double click, and double click. And then I can just go into each one of these and call them what I want. For now, this will just be a plastic. I'll make it like a light blue plastic or something, okay? And I'm going to use the same settings I used last time. I pick a color, and under Reflectance, I choose Beckman. And I'm just going to crank the roughness up and pull the specular down. So roughness, I put at about 84 for reflectance, and then specular strength, I put at about 9. Doesn't have to be exact, okay? Everything's going to be different based off of your own personal settings. Okay, and just like everything, all of these things can be changed. If we go to render, it's too reflective, it's too shiny, it's too blue, whatever the case is, we can always jump back and make it whatever we want. Okay, so plastic blue, I changed the color of it to that blue. I went to reflectance, I went to Beckman, and made the roughness about 84 and the specular 9. Okay, so that's going to be the picture frame itself. I can just drag the blue onto the picture frame. And I'm going to make my glass material. What color is glass? It's transparent, right? Typically on a picture frame, it's going to be 100% transparent. There really wouldn't be like a blue or yellow or whatever. So I'm going to take the brightness off for this, so there is no brightness at all. Okay, I can even uncheck color because it's basically no color at all. Under reflectance, depending on the kind of glass that we have, the reflections in it might be super sharp, or they might be diffused. If you had a matte glass, you had something that had like a texture to it, it would be probably a little bit spread out. Regardless, I'm just going to change it to Beckman. Okay, everything that we do for now, just leave it as Beckman. And then maybe I'll take the roughness down to like, I don't know, 13 or something. All right. So for this one, we have to add transparency because we have a transparent item. So I'm going to click the little checkbox next to transparency for it, and then leave it like that. Okay. If this was a glass where I had a some distortion happening in the background, I would change my settings more. So if I had something like this, I'm really trying to get the glass look, I would play with my settings more. But because we have a picture frame, I don't want any distortion behind it. I want it to look like just a plane of glass, okay? Basically something that's clear and has a shiny specular on it. So that should be good for glass. If it's not, again, I just come back, I play with the settings, and then I get it to where it needs to be. So I'm going to drag glass onto glass. Okay, now the last material, this is picture, and because I'm going to have other pictures, I'm going to put in 01. Okay, so what color is my picture going to be? It'll be my image, right? So anytime we bring an image into Cinema, Cinema is creating a link to an outside file. We have to tell Cinema, hey, this is the folder I'm working with, so that it automatically links all of our stuff correctly. Think of a web page or an InDesign file or an After Effects file or anything like that. Whenever you bring something in, that's where things can get kind of crazy because of how the software works. So before we do anything with this material, we're going to go to Edit and go to Preferences. And mine's taking a minute to load. There we go. So we typically don't do much inside the preferences, especially in this class, but this thing we will have to do every single time we come into class, okay? So under Edit Preferences, we're going to go to they've changed how this one is compared to yours. Files, yes. I just want to make sure I have the right one. It's under Files is typically where it's at. Okay, so yours is going to be different. Under your Files, at the very bottom of it, let me see if I can just find it here, a picture of it. Yeah, Asset Paths. So you have this here where it says Texture Paths down there. Sorry, not Asset Paths, Texture Paths. You want to click the dots on the far right of one of those and load in or click on your main folder. Okay, so your Miniroom project folder, that's the path you're looking for. Okay, so I'm going to do that here, add folder, and then I'm going to tell it to go to my Miniroom and hit OK. And what that does is it just tells Cinema, this is my project I'm working on. Any files that I'm going to be using are going to be inside this folder. So you need to make sure that as you bring files in, you put them inside textures so that it knows where to get them from. If you were to download stuff to your home computer, you throw it on the desktop, or you have pictures in another folder and you pull it from there and you're just linking to all these random spots, Cinema won't have those locations when you come here. So when you render, what will happen is all those pictures are blank and it's just like a black area. So we need to make sure that everything is saved into our textures that we're going to be using, and then we come in and link that folder every single time you come into class. It should be pretty obvious when you hit the render button, like my pictures aren't showing up. But what you don't want to do is forget about that step, render it, leave for the day. You come back after the weekend and nothing rendered like you thought it would, okay? When we do wood, when we do metal, when we do certain kinds of plastic, anything like that where we're bringing in other materials, same thing. All of those things would basically just be blank objects. All right, so we can close that. And now we can go in here to our color and connect it. You can do it two ways, well, three ways, I guess. You can click on the big bar where it says texture. You can click on the dots, or you can go to the arrow and say load image. Any one of these will load the image for you or find the images. Oops, not there. Go. So now that I've loaded it, you can see what we have there. Think about what you see, what you can remember. If you're looking at a picture at home inside of a picture frame, you have the piece of glass and you have this image behind it. How much reflection is on that picture itself? Some? None? A lot? Some, right? And that'll depend too. Like, did you get a glossy print? Probably have a lot. Did you have a matte print? Probably have a little bit. For this, we're just gonna, again, change it to Beckman. And I'm gonna take this roughness up and the specular like really far down, okay? I don't want the reflections to be competing with each other. There's a reflection on the glass and then there's a reflection on the picture. Those two might just be like too much reflection in there and then I can't see my item, okay? So I just basically took the reflection to Beckman, 100% roughness and 10% strength, specular strength, okay? Now, as I drag it in here, I can't drag it onto the picture frame because it's like covered by glass. So I'm going to drag it over here into my object area and just drop it onto picture there. Passe usted. Okay, then you should see over there the 3 different materials that you have, and you should see your picture on there. If you don't see your picture, hit Shift R and then see if it loads. Remember, sometimes the viewport does not show your picture. Sometimes it just doesn't update because it's stupid, and then we render and then we see it. Is it working?
Put it on the interior of my
A couple things that I saw as I looked around. Let's go to this. Okay, so I'm just going to make a shape just so we can see how this happens. So I have this item here. I'm going to put my blue plastic on it, and then I'm going to duplicate this shape, and then I'm going to change it to my picture, let's say. Okay, so basically I have 2 objects right on top of each other with 2 different materials, and then I'm going to hit the render button, and now that looks fine. If I change my angle, let's see. Nope. Nope. Let's see on that one. All right, it's not going to do it as I show it off, of course. Why would it? They're just making a liar out of me. Well, anyway, what would happen is the software fights for like which one gets to get shown. And so it doesn't know which one it should be showing. And so it tries to show like both images at the same time on top of each other. Typically, that's what happens when you have 2 objects literally in the same exact 3D space. So just something to be aware of. All right. Cool. So we have our picture on the glass here, or on our picture there. That's our picture. If we needed to, we could click on this button there. And this allows us to adjust where that material or where that picture is being placed. So if I click on this and click on, no, why aren't you adjusting? Oh, sorry. I click on that, I click on the shader right here, and I change this projection from UV to flat. There we go. Then I can adjust how it's being placed on here. So you see how I can adjust like the movement or the scale of it. I can adjust the positioning of it. Yours may have a grid. I think they changed that in this version. Like that is what it looks like. I like this simple one a lot better. That's nice. So you can adjust what this is doing. Also down here, you can adjust some of these other settings. Like maybe I want this to be stretched out or squished or whatever it is. Okay. The default is basically I have this image, I have this plane, and it matches those 2 things up perfectly. Okay. Typically that's fine, but if you had something where maybe my picture was cut off, Let's say something like this. I didn't want the water in there. I could adjust where that end of the picture is, or I just wanted the trees in there. I could adjust where that is, okay? Cool. All right, so now that we have our glass, our frame, and our picture, now we can grab this and group all those things together, okay? So I've switched back to my modeling mode. My default is always to jump back to the move tool. So anytime I'm like, all right, let's go on to the next thing, I jump back to the move tool. So you may see me do it, you may hear me say it, but I always do it. So I need to group all these together. Every other program is Control-G to group things. So Cinema changes it to Alt-G, just to screw with you. And then I will give this a name, picture frame. Okay, what it does is it creates this thing called a null, drops our stuff inside the null group. And then we can adjust where this is just by sliding it back. There we go. And I'm going to get it close to the wall of where I want that to be. Okay, once I have it where I want it to be, then it's simply a matter of just duplicating it. There's another picture, there's another picture, there's another picture, there's another picture. So I'm just holding Control each time. Another copy, another copy, another copy. If I wanted to change the picture in them, because why would you want 5 pictures of the same thing up there? I have to duplicate this material as well, change the picture, and then reassign it to each item. Okay, so if I have 5 of these, I need 5 of these. And then for each one, I'm just going to go into the color, go into the picture, and then make sure that I have an image inside there. Thank you. 20. So I'm going to grab this one. That's a cool picture. That into here, Miniroom, play, textures. If for some reason your picture doesn't come in, it might be the wrong format. Sometimes JPEGs, for whatever reason, don't save correctly. Opening in Photoshop, resaving it seems to help. So I've uploaded or updated this picture. I'm just going to open up one of these picture frames and just drag this picture onto that picture texture. And then it will update it, okay? This is one of those cases where my image was landscape, but the photo is portrait, so it comes in all distorted, where I probably want to go to this and adjust the length of this and adjust the position of it. Okay, so you can do stuff like that. We could also, obviously, oops, if I hit the right key, duplicate this, rotate it, scale it up big, bigger. There we go. Throw it in the corner, and then now I have like a TV, right in the corner. I don't need the hardware behind it. Think about when you're creating stuff, if you don't see it, there's no reason to actually have it there. So if I make a TV and I don't see the stuff behind it, it doesn't matter. If I made a monitor for my desk, something like this, there's wires underneath. I don't see the connection really behind it, so I don't need to create that. Even how it's connected doesn't have to be how it's connected. I could literally just put an arm on there that would pull down from the ceiling. Like, I'll just make a cube. Give it a rotation, move it over. There we And so now it looks like it's somehow connected to the ceiling. Maybe I can put another cylinder up there, and then that will give me like a mount or something, right? So you have to think about that kind of stuff and how you want to do those kinds of things. Okay, so that's our introduction into the modeling phase of this. The rest of class, I want you to play with these tools, beveling, extruding, that's all we did yet. Yeah, bevel, extrude, and extrude inner. Just to see what kind of shapes that you're going to create. They might be crap, we might throw them out, but that's fine. I want you to get used to navigating the interface using some of these tools so that you're more comfortable with it. Next class, we'll go over creating a desk, creating a chair, and creating a bookcase. So we're going to ramp up pretty quick for this assignment in the next class, okay? You have your sketches of things for your room. Look at what these things are. Pencil holder. These are common things that you would see in an office, right? Or in a desk. You would see pencil holders. What shape would you create for pencil holder? Cylinder, right? And you probably delete the top cap, keep the bottom cap. Done. Or here's a blocky one. That's the same exact way we created the picture frame. It's just a block and it's brought in and it's pushed down further. That's all it is. Some of the shapes that you create by default, create a cylinder real quick because this is one of the ones that people typically do and then it has this issue. So a cylinder is actually 3 pieces. Even though it's 1, it's 3 pieces. As is, you know, you can change all the settings that are over here, which is fine. We don't need to do that right now, but you can. Hit C on it. Then I want you to grab a face and just grab any face that's on the top and just try to move it up. Okay, so I went to that face, grabbed a face, and moved it up, and then what do you notice? What was that? It's a lot of faces, but it's also open, right? So those are actually not connected. Whenever you make a cylinder, for whatever reason, Maxon has decided not to actually connect all those pieces together. We want to connect them if we do anything like that. If I was to go through and try to create that pencil holder, it would be tricky to do this kind of thing with that. So what we need to do is grab all of the points that are on top of this and merge them together so that if there's any overlapping points, it doesn't do that. So I'm going to switch to my point mode, switch to my rectangle selection, grab everything, and then just do a right click and optimize. So I switch to points, switch my marquee, or my selection to marqueeing, grabbed everything, and then I just right click and optimize. And what that does is just if there's points on top of points, it puts them together, okay? So it just makes your life a lot easier because now if you wanted to, let's say, grab the faces on top here, we can grab the faces there, do our extrude inner, and do our extrude down, and then there we would have, you know, that kind of setup. And then, of course, we could add, let's say, a bevel here and a bevel there. Okay. So all I did was the same exact stuff we did, extruding it in, extruding it down, and then beveling those 2 edges all the way around it. If you get to a point where it's like it's not working, hit the delete key, remake it. It should take you a few seconds to make all these shapes. They're not going to be like crazy pieces you're going to spend 3 hours on. They're just little bits of trial type things. I also recommend taking your, I guess I can't do that. Taking your divisions down. So if I go to my object, obviously 12. Optimize again, going to my points. okay? So you'll see these things will come a lot faster to you the more you play with them, okay? If it's a complex shape, don't do it right away. But even something like this, I have no idea what this is. A soft grippy, okay. Even something like this, how would you create that? Right, a bunch of cylinders on a rectangle base. It's a way to do it, right? There's no wrong way to model something. It's just a matter of what works. You could also do this. If I had a plane, I'm going to turn on my divisions here so I can see the lines. If I grab all of these faces here, and I extrude it inner, and then I extrude it up, it's blocky, but it works. Okay, so I just grabbed all the faces on that, extruded each face inward, and then extruded each face up. Okay, so for the rest of the class, just play with the tools. Don't be concerned about this has to look perfect or it has to be exactly like my picture. Just get used to the tools. Just get used to moving, scaling, rotating, positioning things. When we come in next time, we'll get a little bit more into this has to look more like a desk or more like a chair. Cool? Questions yet?